Hi there, welcome to Bernie Blackout News. I'm Theo Talcott. We're in Manchester, Vermont at GNAT TV studios, and I am joined by some very distinguished guests today. And we're going to talk about how we can save the earth in ceremony and many other things. So we're just going to go around and introduce ourselves. And
Hi, my name is Beverly Little Thunder, and I'm honored to be here. And I'm from the Standing Rock Nation of Lakota.
Hi, I'm Charlie McGazo. I'm a board member of Wabaunawan Dawn Society. I'm also a tribal member of the Nohegan-Cowassuk tribe in Vermont.
My name is Arthur Blackhawk. I am a dreamer, storyteller, a water protector, part Native American, and glad to be here.
Hi, my name is Trinity Delano. I'm a junior at Burn Burden Academy, and I'm very interested in just doing whatever we can to protect our planet.
My name is Aisha Navarrete. I'm also a junior at BBA, and recently Trinity and I and some other students have been working towards speaking at town meetings and trying to get 90% renewable energy by 2050. I know it's a small step, but I think it's a really good step in the right direction.
Oh.
yeah,
Oh.
wonderful. At Standing Rock, things were begun in ceremony, so we'd like to invite to begin today with a little ceremony from Beverly.
We always burn sage when we're offering a prayer, and I'm just going to offer a brief prayer. Oh, Pelami Atankashila, Pela. Hilhani Oshte. I give thanks for this good day, Tankashila, and I ask that you speak through us, guide our words and guide our thoughts, open the ears of those that need to hear. I give thanks for the privilege and honor of sitting in this place and sharing these words at this time. Oh, Matakwese.
Oh.
Wonderful. I'm committed to the idea that we need indigenous knowledge and indigenous wisdom if we're going to save the planet. I feel like that's the missing piece. And I've been struggling for a long time in the environmental movement to see a way forward for us. And we haven't gotten very far, honestly. We're like, the planet's dying. And our people are just still putting pipelines out and fracking, and I think it's just a general disrespect for the land. And the way Native peoples have always talked about honoring the land, I just think it's the key forward. So with that, maybe I'll just toss it to you, and does that make sense to you?
Mm-hmm. It makes perfect sense to me. I understand, what you're saying, and which is one of the reasons why we organized the Wabanman ceremony. I can't even pronounce it because not my language. And our organization is hoping to bridge that gap for non-natives like yourself to learn and to be guided as to what you can do as an ally to help with saving the planet. Because as indigenous people, a lot of our people have the knowledge, but a lot of our people have also bought in to the colonization that has been prevalent for the last 200 years. And undoing that colonization is going to take another 200 years. I know that I live off-grid, and I don't have a tie to electricity, or we didn't dig a well, it's a stream-fed well. And we try the best that we can, and that's all that any of us can do. So I'm also committed to seeing that we stop using fossil fuels and that more people start being in touch with the natural world, that they know that this earth they walk upon is their mother.
I believe that one of the messages that came out of Standing Rock is that they told people that there are Native people where you come from. When you go home, to reach out to them from the perspective of a greater community, to work with the indigenous, the Native American people. There are 4 recognized tribes in the state of Vermont. There are other Native American people who live here also. And, you know, the renewable energy, water is life. It's a source, not a resource. Our bodies are made up of it. That's what we have all in common, especially as human beings. To recognize that and to work on the community level together is very purposeful, because usually such movements, it comes from the bottom up. And I think that this type of movement can actually do that and ferment that. And there hopefully will be better results, at least better communication.
Yeah, well, Bonawandon Society is just that, an organization that's multicultural, looking to bridge the gap between the nations and all races in order to save our planet. A lot of people ask me why I wear this. It's because we're at war. Who are we at war with? Corporate America, a standard or a colonized view of the world we live in? We're mostly at war with ourselves. It's the work we must do within ourselves. And so at Standing Rock, it had a lot to do with healing and reconciliation. We can't ask others to do what we ourselves are unwilling to do.
Guys want to chime in here?
Sure, this is so interesting listening to what you all have to say. I'm, like, as a young person right now, this is just such a learning experience, and I'm trying to be more involved, because I'm looking at, you know, the government right now and everything that's going on in the world, and I'm realizing that if we all don't each take our active role and try to, you know, be involved and actually speak up and do what we're advocating for, then it doesn't get done. So I'm very hopeful. I'm very disappointed, but I'm also very hopeful that we can turn this and make this into a movement, like you said, from the bottom up, because that is where it starts. And I'm hoping.
And I strongly believe that what you guys have all been saying about unity is really important. And although we all come from different places or all come from different beliefs, this is our earth, and there's lots we need to do to take care of it.
I think that the movement that you're talking about building has already started. And I think that you're both a part of that foundation. Lakota believe in, you know, we look ahead 7 generations, and you're the 7th generation, at least in my lifetime. And we have to remember that the Standing Rock occupation was started by the young ones.
Right.
And the way that it was started was by the young ones listening to the elders. And there's a big difference between an elder and an old person. Those people that live their lives with integrity are considered elders. And the young people were able to hear them rather than to block them out like so many young people in America do. And you have the energy where we don't. And, you know, corporate America is really the enemy. And that is a paradigm that needs to be changed. Our government doesn't need to be overthrown. Our government needs to be restructured. And who better to help with that restructuring than our youth?
Mm-hmm.
I think with Bonawandon Society, we're coming from a perspective where we're a bridge with the greater community or society around us. Abenakis are Native Americans in the state of Vermont, Nadakana, our homeland. We're still a minority. I've been to many events, and I've always had people come up and ask, you know, one, we didn't know you were here. most people don't realize that there are 4 state-recognized tribes in the state of Vermont. And then they ask, well, you know, what can we do to participate and to help? And Wabanawandon Society, we try to act as a gateway to the tribes. If somebody has a service or time or an effort of sorts that they want to contribute, we will direct them to that tribe directly. We're not doing this for ourselves in terms of our own personal recognitions or for money, but it's to work on the community level with our peoples around us.
Some of our work, I hope, is to say, how do we bear witness? We're strong enough to see the genocide in our country. We're not afraid to bear witness. And that's, I think, some of the medicine that we can bring, is that we're not looking away anymore.
Well, I think maybe if I can jump in and we work a little bit back that way, upstream, it's important to know your history. And your history has to be a truthful history. That's usually the first step to a healing and a reconciliation, is to know what your personal history is. It's not to beat yourself up with the past. The past you made no choices within. You're only responsible for the choices you make as people moving forward in life. And so to speak to the local history here of Ndagana, and the land that we're on right now is the Elnu land. I'd like Charlie to talk a little bit about that kind of history and where peoples were left in Vermont, traumatized.
You know, the Wabanaki people, we're the Western Abenaki people. We had a huge nation called the Wabanaki Confederacy, and it went from the Champlain Valley, which is Betabok, the water that lies between. And like most places, we weren't discovered, we were always here. All the way to up towards Newfoundland, New Brunswick. Our brothers, sisters, cousins, relatives, Penobscot, Passamaquoddy, Mi'kmaq, all these people, we were all one people at one time. And the divisions came, you know, through political divisions, first of all, when Northern Europeans came here. One of the second acts of the federal government here was to pass what they called the Indian Intercourse Act, which made it illegal for Wabanaki people to travel back and forth to the family units, to trade, to have affiliation with. It made it illegal to do that. It made it easier to put state lines in. It made it easier to separate people in order to do that. And it was the mentality, the historical mentality, that brought about all of this. We were the first people to be decimated. Wabanaki or Wabanawan means people of the first light. In a spiritual sense, for those who used it, it was called the magical light, was another translation of it. But we were the first people to be decimated by the people who came here, who discovered, if you will, this part of the world. And then the ideas of manifest destiny, which has been mentioned in many history books, took hold in this area. And this was the first place where that type of history came from. Today we had to be a hidden people for a long time. Part of that was to survive in terms of programs that were designed to help society, such as the eugenics movement. The other times it was to be wary of those who were around you who could do or maybe perceived to do you harm. There was a saying about that. It's okay to be Indian, but be careful who you tell it to. Mm-hmm. And that's still pervasive today. Maybe not so much in a physical sense, but in people's careers especially. You know, you have to be careful if you're applying for a job. You know, God, should I put down that I'm Abenaki? Are they going to, is that going to be held against me? And slowly things are starting to change. We have our names, but they're not recognized by the government. It's not on my driver's license, Magazo. That's my family name. That's my clan name. Those are the types of things that we had to hold hidden in order to survive in a greater society. But slowly those things are starting to change. And it's not a perceived battle of us versus them anymore. It's about how we can be more of ourselves and have in common with a greater society. And that's the way we're headed. That's what state recognition did. It ended the argument about who an Abenaki was for ourselves, who was Indian and who wasn't among ourselves. The government cannot define that for you. And that's what the federal government has tried to do again and again. And we're allowed to have our own definitions of our own people. And that's the way we were originally, and that's the way we're going to continue to live. And in that sense, to borrow other words, maybe this new birth of freedom will help us in order to be a stronger people, but strong enough to stand with a greater society. And I think that's the ultimate aim. How do we live with our brothers and sisters? How do we live in a better environment that's cleaner, where we have a source of water that's clean, we have a source of energy that is cleaner? These are the questions that we're going to be reflecting on in order to go forward.
I think it's important to also remember that Christianity also played a large part in a lot of indigenous people sort of melding into the greater society. A lot of our traditions have been lost because of what we were required to learn in order to get help from a church. Once your hunting grounds, your gathering grounds are off limits to you, you have to survive somehow. And miraculously, there was always a church. And there was actually a church just across the border that a lot of Abenaki retreated to for safety. But the price was high. You had to memorize their scripture. You had to ascribe to their beliefs and traditions. A lot of times it was in conflict with what a tribe's traditional beliefs were. As a Two-Spirit woman, I've had firsthand knowledge that for a number of years, a Two-Spirit person, which is an LGBTQ person, was not wanted on the reservation. Families were shamed, and the missionaries and heads of the church said that's not what it says in the Bible. God says that's wrong. It wasn't until the AIDS epidemic in the 80s and 90s that young men were diagnosed and wanted to come home to die, and the families had to reconcile, their shame with their love for their child. And so now, there's Two-Spirit people all across the country who are going to powwows and who are dancing in whichever gender they feel comfortable in. But that's just an example of some of the oppression that occurred even here. And the first Abenaki event that I ever went to was held at St. Anne's up in the islands. And I found that very strange, that's where the only place that we could find to gather. And I'm not Abenaki, I'm Lakota, but I live here now and I've been welcomed by these people. And so this is now my home, and it's my responsibility to help disclose some of the lies that have gone around about the people that originally lived here.
So, one of the bitter ironies of Native American history is that they were called savages, and like there was a very Anglo-American cultural dominance, like we're the smart European white people, and these people are like the savages, and so we'll boss them around. It was very irritating, but the incredible sophistication of the two-spirit idea, the indigenous peoples had very intelligent ways of dealing with LGBT issues way before we were even starting to think about gender-neutral bathrooms. LGBT people were included in society, and we actually met in front of the White House.
Yes.
And maybe we'll rerun that show after this one, and you'll see her meeting in front of the White House at the Native Nation March, which is pretty exciting, actually. But could you say a little more about that history, about how, what the Two-Spirit Nation means to you? And
Well, Two-Spirit is a term that was coined in the early 90s by a group of Native people. And it was coined mainly for the anthropological community, because up until then they were using words like Bradash and Winkte. And Winkte is a Lakota word that applies to men only, and Bradash has a Persian root that means boy prostitute. So it kind of leaves me out. So we came together because we were asked to find a word that it was inclusive of everyone. And so we chose the term Two-Spirit, which at that time we researched, and there was no native language that translated for a gay or lesbian person into Two-Spirit. But the thought process was that they were always in balance. They had both the male and female aspect and saw things through the feminine and the masculine mindset. In the Lakota tribe, it was the Two-Spirit people that adopted children who were orphaned. When we were hunting, people were killed. Parents died of illnesses, and there were oftentimes children left. And most of the time they were adopted by some of the gay men in the community. And the women learned a lot about female health, and they were oftentimes the midwives and caretakers for the elderly. So there was a role for everyone within the tribe. No one, if someone had a child that was Down syndrome, they didn't say, "Oh, did you do something bad because your child turned out not right?" It was, "Oh, what a gift you've been given." And that child was a part of that circle. So for me, being a Two-Spirit woman, I see myself as being there as of service to my community, and caring for my elders and for the young people. We've had a lot of young people go through our house that were homeless, and are now out on their own.
that's great.
I believe even historically, if I'm not mistaken, in the ceremony of the sun dance, you take your medicine and put it on the pole at the top, and you would ask somebody of Twin Spirit to carry that up that pole for you and place it. You couldn't do it yourself.
That may have been in some sun dances. Each sun dance is very, very different.
Yeah.
And I've not seen that done. And unfortunately, I have seen a ceremony where someone who was Two-Spirited was rejected and excluded. So, getting rid of colonial thought is really hard for even our people who have had it drilled into them. It's just like, this Cheeto wants to build this wall. And
Cheeto?
Cheeto is
Who is that?
45.
You shall not be named.
yeah, he will not be named. And we didn't put that wall there. Those were indigenous people all the way down the south, because that's part of America. And the Canadian border, we didn't put that there. Those are indigenous people all the way to the north. But now we're all divided, and if you're south of the border, then you're Mexican. You're an alien. Yeah, even worse, you're an alien, which, you know, society as a whole has bought into that. They've drank the poison Kool-Aid, so to speak. And so it's going to take time to help them unlearn some of the lies that they've been told. And a good ally is going to go back and learn the history of this country and learn how this country was built and the lies that it was built upon. And it's not pretty. You know, there's a book out called Lies My Teachers Told Me. And it's probably one of the best books that I have read about today's America, and dispels a lot of myths. Not all of them, but a lot of them. Yeah.
I feel like it's always been a conquer and divide mentality, so that an elite, if you will, however you want to picture that or put words to that, believe they have power. And for our people, it started out early with the conflicts between English and French people. The English that were here, they gave us medals, silver medals that had King George on it. So if they saw an Abenaki go through the woods and they saw that silver medal, you were a good Indian. You were an ally. You weren't going to be killed, molested, or taken advantage of. And earlier than that, it was the same mentality with the Jesuits that came here. When they came here and they saw us, in their eyes, we didn't have a spirit because we hadn't been baptized in their way. And because of that, people who don't have spirits, they're like an innate object or an animal. And so if they killed an Abenaki, it wasn't a sin to them. We were just that. And that's where the beginnings of these conquers and divide attitudes started, from the first contact. And what it's done today is that, at least I've noticed in a general society today, there's all this conflict restarted amongst peoples. Because if you're arguing among yourselves, you're not paying attention to what's going on with your leadership.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And to me, that's this theory that they call chaos, that's being talked about more and more. It's a benefit to those that you view as an elite, or who can financially or politically control things for the whole. And I think that paradigm is being recognized again, and I think there's inroads being made to it. But it's going to take more than just one people, Native American or original peoples, to do that.
Correct.
It's going to have to be, in concert with our allies in a greater society to do that, because our needs are basically all the same. And I would like to hear, how, you see that where you are today.
Mm-hmm.
Well, in a way, I think that all the things that are going on politically and the divide may be like a disguise, and because we have yet to heal so many of our problems from the beginning, that like I'm Mexican, and so right now I'm feeling that with the whole thing that's going on with Trump. My dad was born there, my little brother was born there, and to see some of the things that were said is really hard, because I grew up there and it's a beautiful place and it's a beautiful culture, but I'm trying to take something positive out of it. And what I've seen is that we all have to be true individuals within like you say, a greater society and a greater world. And it's more about coming together and finally healing all of those awful things that have happened, and not necessarily forgetting them, but finding a way to heal them, and knowing, in a way, it's beautiful that we all have to come together, because there's no other way to do it but to come together. And one day, hopefully soon, we'll all realize that, and we'll all realize that the only way that we're gonna move successfully, each and every one of us, is if we do it together.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Amen.
Oh.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. I think that too. It's just there are so many I don't know, we're just kind of set against each other, and that isn't the way that it needs to be. It's not the way that it should be, but it somehow has just become that way, which I think in a large part is thanks to corporate America and kind of the lies that are fed to society about how different everyone is, when really we're all here on this planet together. And I think in anything that we're trying to accomplish, definitely unity and fostering instead of hate and political divides and social divides, just a collective like life on Earth where we're all on the same planet, and the borders that have been drawn are all invisible. They're not really lines that are there. And I think that's something that I try to remind myself when I get like too, honed in on all the horrible things that are happening in the world. I kind of have to like step back and say, okay, this is one Earth. Like we're all in this one Earth in the solar system. And yeah.
Yeah, I think it's really grounding to get back to that sort of the reality. We're on Mother Earth, we're together, and that's what I find so healing about this way of thinking that Lakota and others bring forward, is that we don't have, there's something underneath us already. We don't have to like make this thing up as we go. We're like on Mother Earth, she's there, the water's sacred, we have all these things to come forward with.
Has to do, I think, with relationship. People are at different places in relationships. We've all had successful relationships. We've all had our hearts broken. So we know what a relationship that doesn't succeed feels like. And the question is, what relationship do we not only have with our community of two-legged, but what relationship do we have with the standing ones? Those things that grow and feed us, the rain, the soil, the air. Corporate America has us in a place where they want to sell us the water and sell us the air and the soil. And this is not the way Creator made things. This is the way corporate America has overtaken a democracy that's vulnerable to this kind of control of the narrative. Which brings me to a plug for public access TV. Educate yourselves, inform yourselves, because the message isn't coming out in the mass media. And we need to engage in relationships on this level in order to inform ourselves and educate ourselves to move wisely forward.
That's right.
On a historical note, think back 1,000, 2,000 years ago. Our archetypes are basically the same. And as a people and in different cultures, different religions, if you look at those, one example I'll give is in the early church, the early Catholic Church. They revered nature. Their churches were decorated with nature on the inside. And it was to respect God was to respect nature. And in the early centuries of that religion, that was revered. And in most major religions, it was looked at and revered. So, if you look back not so far in the distant past, we are all alike. We all looked at those things. The world grew up, many people appeared, but in some ways we lacked behind in terms of our intellect overcame our natural instincts in dealing with our resources, our sources, the people around us. So on some level we didn't change. We changed into something else. And this is what, the creation of life is supposed to teach us. It's more than just a choice. I'm the kind of person, unfortunately, where I change when I get beaten into reasonableness. When I start hearing the same things over and over again around me of not to be called a name, but why am I wrong? And when I hear that enough about why I made an error, then I can contemplate it and, okay, maybe I should change.
I think that's really, really interesting because whenever I'm in conflict or like even recently when I'm debating political things or all sorts of different types of things, I try to remember that everyone's reality is their reality. And so I think an essential part of moving forward is going to be that acceptance of everyone's individuality and everyone's reality and what they believe. And then slowly we'll come to realize that it's not that different and that we may just have a different way of saying it or we may just live a different life. So I think we get really stuck with like labels or even just, we don't take a minute to listen, we just respond. And I think if we all were to take the time to listen and then take the time to be listened, then we would understand that we really aren't all that different and that the only way to move forward will be together. I know I've said that many times, but I really believe that.
Yeah. Amen.
Yes. But I think that you're right. You know, one of the skills that we as human beings have lost is the ability to listen. And if you're truly listening, you're not going to react immediately. And when someone says something and you react with a response, that means that you've been thinking in your mind how to answer that question, and you're not listening.
Exactly, yeah.
And so, you know, a response is something that you're able to step back from and look at from all angles before you offer a response. So I think that's very, very commendable that, you know, at your age, you've learned that. And for some of us who are older, it took us longer to learn those things. And it's one step at a time. It's baby steps at a time. And I think us sitting here talking about the indigenous people of this area is one of those steps. This didn't happen overnight. They didn't get tribal recognition in the state overnight. It was a lot of long, hard work and talking to people. And, you know, the youth movement didn't happen overnight. You know, it took some hard things happening in the world for the youth to stand up and say, no, this has got to change. It's not the world I want to grow up in. And so I think that's a huge step. But it's one step at a time.
I think slowly all the problems that have been going on will be brought up because of these small little things. And also a big thing is in order to move forward environmentally, we do have to do it together, which is so interesting because that means that we have to reconciliate with those people that we may have arguments with or things. In order to move forward with the earth and take care of it, we're going to have to figure out all the other problems that have been going on in the world.
Well, you're teaching the next generation behind you. And so when you're in your 30s, you're going to have a whole generation of young 20-year-olds who are going to be of like mind. And so then your numbers are going to increase. And you're going to keep teaching. They will teach the next generation. And so forth and so forth. And that's what we've done. Unknowingly, that's what we've done. So that's why we sit here.
I think change is difficult, whether it's on a personal level, family level, community level, town, state, nation. But it has to start, you know, with the individuals in the community that we all live in, you know, to begin with. I've never gotten a directive from a high leader that had all the answers. You know, we have to live our answers. And that means a responsibility of trying to find them. I like to stay warm in the wintertime. I think most people do.
Especially here.
And yeah, and to give people the idea that, you know, the natural gas that we have come from a place that's heavily polluted, where they fracked this to get it out of the ground, that it's poisoned people. There are rings of cancer, literally people 300 miles away from where and farther away from, it's affecting the waters of these people who live there, the original people, the native people. And at what expense to the earth? You know, that idea, you know, to turn, you know, when our furnaces go on, to have people think about that is a starting point. Do we want to continue to do that? Do we want to continue to hurt the earth, which is a living entity in our culture? It's as alive as anybody sitting here. And to hear it cry every time it's hurt or abused. I spoke with a woman last night from California who lived in the area where it was burning, and whole communities were burned. And she said at night when the fires were going on, she could hear the earth cry. And to be able to hear that and to admit it, much less see it. It's hard not to be convinced of something if we don't see it, but there are many things going on if we pay attention. And that is the catalyst of change, when we can point to something and say, this is going on with the earth. It's affecting our community this way. People are starting to act this way because of it. And with the many people that are living here on earth, and the many more people that they say are going to come, if we're going to survive or have a chance to get along, new resources that are renewable, you know, as time goes on, needs to be considered. But to change the way we think about it is the hardest thing. But I think by at least starting the conversation and talking about it, we're moving in that direction. How is my children or my grandchildren going to heat themselves? I think there's a better way of doing things. And technology is getting better. In that sense, it is a help. But we have to also look at it as, to stop it as a manipulation of nature and science. You know, yes, get a benefit out of it, but at whose cost? What is the cost? And to consider things that way instead of what the bank is going to cost us.
Yeah.
Well, and I think change, you know, is going to happen whether you want it to or not, right? Everything changing.
Changes.
And we can't control time. So we're given this finite slice of time to do our piece, to tell our story, to share our narrative. And when we look at the world we're in now, and we look at the Vermont legislature closing out without any Indigenous legislation, it shows us that there's a larger community out there that's not informed or doesn't care. When we look at the fact that we're building a fossil fuel structure through our own state, a pipeline that will kill our water should it leak.
And when it leaks.
Precisely. All these things leak. They're infallible. Out at Standing Rock, they had laid a large section of pipeline. And because of all the anxiety of what was going around in that construction crew, they laid the pipe in the wrong direction and had to dig it all up and turn it around. So they operated under stress as well. And that pipeline will leak. All pipelines leak.
It already has leaked in two places.
Just this week in Vermont, there was a, the WCAX showed this a video of flaring off in Addison County of the natural gas pipeline. And they were doing some kind of work on the pipeline, but for like 4 days they were like flaring this giant pipeline. And it's, so look it up online if you want this video, but it's horrific what we're up against. And this is if the pipeline's running well. And so it needs to be opposed. It's very painful.
Thank you.
We're getting sort of to the ends of our time here, so maybe if we could ask you all for closing comments, and if maybe Beverly would lead us with some sage prayers again to close out. That might be nice, but anything else still?
Start that way?
Yeah. Or,
Why don't we start this way?
Well, to reiterate what I've been saying, I believe that we will make a change, and in order to do that, we're just going to have to stay true to ourselves and unite and it'll be beautiful when it happens.
I just think that awareness is going to be also something that's just very important going forward, because I think we like to think that we're very aware of everything, but at the same time, like Aisha was talking about, we're not really listening. And in order to really do anything, we need to be listening and we need to be aware, and working in unity towards what we want to accomplish. So I'm very hopeful going forward, and I think change will definitely happen because it's inevitable, and it will be in the right direction because so many people want it to go in the right direction, and positivity can kind of, overcome the negative aspects of the world.
I just want to thank you all. I want to thank the Creator for this day, this opportunity to share this conversation in an open and honest and non-hostile way. May we continue to care enough about each other and our planet that future generations will speak of this moment as a turning point.
Which I thank all the people here who've had good things to say and participate in. This is a catalyst to start a conversation across the table. For my own people, I want to make a quick reminder. There are 3 bills pending in the Vermont legislature. H339, which is a scholarship for higher education for Native American and Abenaki people in the state of Vermont. There are 2 other bills, H488 and S83, which promotes Indigenous Peoples Day. The chairs of those committees have the votes, and they're keeping those bills in committee. So they know who they are. We expect that they will do the right thing. We ask you to contact your representatives, your state senators, and tell them to do these things. It is a win-win situation for the state of Vermont. We're not asking anything from the state or the taxpayers to do this. It is the right thing to do in order for communities to work with each other. It's a step forward, and we want to make that bridge with greater community. So we ask you for your help in this. Ano Ganawa Wanabakik, that's the Abenaki way.
And I just want to say thank you. Thank you, Creator, for giving us the words that we've spoken and for allowing our hearts to be put on this table and shared. I feel hopeful when I sit across from young women who are committed to healing the earth, because I know that you're not the only two. And I'm 70, and I count the years that I still have on this planet. And so when we sit in a circle like this, it gives me hope, and it also gives me the energy to continue taking one step at a time. So I thank Creator and ask that each of us in this circle be blessed as we leave this circle, and that we be given the guidance and the path that's in front of us, and given the strength that we might need to face the obstacles ahead of us, and the heart to be able to celebrate when we have successes. How Dakar say. Thank you.
Bless you. And, we give thanks to the Creator for a beautiful day of spiritual activism, and grateful for this culture. And we're grateful to Anne and our friends at GNET. Doing good. The reason we need community access television and to be the media ourselves is that we have to tell our own stories, because obviously corporate America is not going to tell us about these things.
Exactly.
MSNBC does not cover fracking. So
It's fake news anyway.
fake news! We're not fake news. This has been the real news here at GNET TV. So